Hello and welcome. I'm Richie Murray, and we're here today with Rob Hoffman, multi-time USAC Chief Mechanic of the Year, and the USAC National Sprint Cars winningest team and winningest championship team, 12 titles, and most recently with Brady Bacon again this year. And always a threat to win since 1929, Hoffman Auto Racing. So Rob, tell me, the team's almost coming up on 100 years. This is an enduring team. Just the enduring aspect of this team over these years, what has it been?
Really, it was just a love of racing that was born between my grandfather, who started back in 1929, stripping down a T model and souping it up and going out there and barnstorming with it. And then my dad fell in love with racing in 1952. With a midget that my grandfather had purchased to race, and thankfully we got that midget back and restored it to its former glory. And now, I grew up here, literally in the shop, and this is pretty much all I've known. I've never had golf, never had any other type of activities other than racing, so I'm pretty much one-dimensional.
So pretty much grew up in this deal, but tell me a little bit about the family's background before outside of racing, because that's a pretty interesting story in itself as well.
Well, my grandfather was kind of a street hustler. Only had a 6th grade education, but he was one of these smart guys, and got into real estate at the right time and made some money there. Owned a lumber company at one point in time, and his cars were sponsored by Park Lumber back then. And my father went into real estate, and my grandfather ended up going into banking and running a small bank. So I don't know, I guess it skipped a generation, but I am staying away from real estate. I ended up I'm running a small bank now.
Okay, and obviously your grandfather Gus and father Richard, both National Sprint Car Hall of Famers, and you got to work with both of them. Very few people have had 3 generations all working at once in cohesion and winning championships and winning races. What was that like, just having basically your whole family there and being able to work alongside?
A lot of times it was a lot like Orange County choppers. There was a lot of yelling back and forth, but at the end of the day, we all pulled together and came to the same goals, and it's always been a goal to win a national championship, and I was thankful that we were finally able to do that in '89.
And you went straight basically into the mechanical side. Did you do any racing? I noticed you had a couple of USAC sprint car starts as a
driver.
Yes, I did. Tell the story on that background.
Well, my father always said I'll never drive one of his cars, but we were out in Missouri and they were short field cars, so we had 2 pavement cars at the time, and I always wanted to drive, so I jumped in one and got to drive it, and it was just a start and park thing. Well, the next day there was something wrong with the primary car, but Steve Butler had already qualified it, so I had to get into the primary car, which wasn't handling well, and he got into the backup that I was driving. And that was kind of a nightmare of a race. I spun once, I went down into the infield, the entire front straightaway on pavement, chased a USAC official, and got back on the track in turn 1. But yeah, it was definitely an experience.
So a short-lived career behind the wheel. But,
yes.
But obviously all the success behind the scenes on the mechanical side, but that was where your focus was right from the start as a young person. With lots of dreams of driving, you went straight to the mechanical side.
I always wanted to drive. I really did. And, to kind of show my father up, I got a ride in this real piece of junk. I shouldn't say that, the guy's still alive. Anyway, I got a ride in this car, and it was not the best of equipment. We were at Lawrenceburg, and the first race was a total disaster. The engine wouldn't run. I basically had 2 throttle positions, idle and full. And then he got that straightened out for the second race, and I did a little bit better in the prelims, but not really that good. They started me on the tail, and I ended up driving to 7th. I mean, they made some changes to the car, and it was absolutely perfect for me. So that was my one moment of glory behind the wheel.
And you had Hoffman family has been involved in sprint car midget racing, but they had that time in IndyCar racing in the 70s and 80s, and I understand that you were the youngest crew chief ever at the Indianapolis 500, age 20.
As far as I know, I don't know anybody else that was age 20 that was a crew chief.
But how was that whole experience in IndyCar racing and the differences between that whole deal and running sprint cars and midgets?
And you know, my foundation when I was a younger kid was mostly sprint cars and midgets. But we got our first IndyCar when I was 9 years old. And so I kind of grew up on IndyCars. We sold our sprint car operation when I was 13. And, you know, most of my experience had been on IndyCar work. And that does not translate directly into dirt sprint car racing. I had to kind of change my whole mindset when we went back to doing that in 1987. But yeah, I got a fake ID when I was 16 years old. Not for the reason that most other kids do, but so that I could join CART and be in the pits and work on these cars. And it was a really great time, a great experience for me to grow up and be affiliated with the team and see the technology that's out there and bring some of that stuff to the sprint cars that we run now.
In your first championship in 1989, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but very unique car that came along, very successful, interesting engine package. You built the car. Just talk about that process of coming to that, to build that car and putting it on the track and hiring one of the greatest drivers of all time.
One of the first things that happened was USAC had Thursday Night Thunder, and they were running pavement now. So we took a dirt frame, and of course, most of my experience had been on pavement, so now I'm back in my element. And I modified the dirt frame to do what I thought we needed for pavement, and it turned out it was a really good car. Kevin Huntley, who had never driven on pavement, ran second to Greg Staub, and he could have won it, but he let Staub around him there at the end. But anyway, I digress. The Buick V6 was basically an enhanced version of that, and that was Vogler came to us and said, hey, I really liked how your cars look there. Can Rob build me a car for a Buick V6? Because I've got a Buick V6 deal, and I've got tires, and I got rear ends that I can bring to you. And, you know, my father and I, neither one of us wanted Rich Vogler because USAC was also wing racing, and he wasn't the best wing driver. But he was absolutely awesome on pavement and pretty damn good on dirt, too. My grandfather determined that absolutely we were going to have Rich Vogler in the car because it was too much to turn down. So Rich and I got together, and we got this Buick V6 and had to build a car for it. And of course it caused all kinds of controversy because I had to make the frame extra wide to get the Buick V6 in, and I had the driver and the tail tank and the steering gear all offset to the left. And USAC wanted to ban us, but they ended up saying that we just had to put things back on center. And we actually didn't win a race until it went on center, and after that it was pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah, and how big was that first championship? Getting that, I think you wrapped it up in Ontario there, but of all places, but just getting that first championship after all those years.
It was absolutely huge. My father said that we were not allowed to get a four-wheeler until we won a USAC sprint car race. And that wasn't until July of '89. So until that point in time, we pushed these cars around. I was in a lot better shape back then. But now we got the sprint car and the four-wheeler, and having that championship under our belt, it was like the biggest feather in the cap that we ever had. And then obviously it was followed by a tremendous tragedy the next year. And it's something that's still, I mean, I can picture it in my mind right now, and it's something that never leaves you.
But you carried on, you went with Robbie Stanley, but to carry on, to keep on going after all that, and to still be successful, obviously very hard on you, but
it was.
You dug in. Where did you find that motivation to keep on going on there?
I don't know. I talk about racing being just as addictive as heroin. You just can't get it out of your blood. And although I stepped away from it after Stanley was killed, I could not stay out. I mean, I basically took a half a year off and I was back the next season. And I've been doing it pretty much ever since. It's was only in 2017 that I kind of stepped away from the chief mechanic job. I took a job at this bank as a president of the bank, and it just demanded a whole lot more of my time than what I could give to both the bank and to the race team, and it wasn't fair for me to shortchange either one. So the bank actually puts money on in my pocket and bread on the table, and the race car kind of takes it off. So kind of made it real easy to make that decision.
Yeah, and working with all these drivers, with Rich and Robbie Stanley and eventually Dave Darlin and Tracy Hines, Brady Bacon, all these great drivers. But getting to work with these guys, from your aspect, was it easy to bounce ideas? Did you guys bounce ideas off of each other, or how was the mechanism, I guess, of working with each other all these years?
You know, some of the drivers absolutely, you know, they would just say, do what you need to do to the car. And other drivers, they wanted to do what they wanted to do to the car, whether I wanted to do it or not. And we'd come to loggerheads there occasionally on that. But some of the drivers, we work collaboratively. Brady's a great example of that. When he and I are together, we're bouncing ideas back and forth and seeing what we can do to improve it and make the car ready to win that race.
And fast forwarding to the 2010s with the addition of Brady to the team, you know, he's obviously been pretty much your longest tenured driver and won the most races for you guys. I think 27 at this point, 3 championships. Just what can you put into words about what Brady has meant to you and since he's joined this team?
You know, absolutely a wonderful guy. He and I get along very well, and I don't know many people that don't get along with Brady. But he's really a pleasure to work with, and it's just a good combination that we really clicked together and found some good speed. And you know, he brought us into the Triple X, drugged me kicking and screaming away from the twisters and the F5s that we were running, but it was a good move to make, and he certainly is a heck of a driver to wheel those things.
And these days, a different bit of setup since you've taken a step back a few years to focus your interest on the banking business, but just explain how this setup is these days with Brady's team and your team kind of joining forces and how that all works.
Well, you know, I stepped away from racing, and my father wanted to continue on, so he would make a deal with a race team, and they would, in exchange for financial support, they would enter as Hoffman Auto Racing, and he'd go to the races and give whatever kind of advice or whatever to the team that he could give. And I really had nothing to do with racing, especially that first year, because I said, you don't take an alcoholic to a bar. And that's exactly how I felt. I knew that if I got near it again, I'd be sucked back in. But after my dad passed, wouldn't you know, he left me the race team. And so I'm back at it. But you know, it's been a pleasure to be with Brady. I absolutely hate the role of car owner because I'm a hands-on guy, and I just don't like to sit there and just watch. I want to be more of a participant, and that led to my latest project, building a little 500 car for Brady for this year. So that way I can get back hands-on, and it's only one race a year, so it won't take away that much from the bank.
All right, we're standing in front of a special car for the 2021 season. Rob, can you give us the details on what you got going on?
Well, you know, I couldn't stand sitting on the sidelines anymore, and I was looking for a way to get back in the racing where I was actually turning wrenches and fabricating and having a good time doing what I was doing. So I thought, well, why not do a little 500 car? It's one race a year, so perfect. And, you know, we'd sold our Beast and a little 500 car, and I sold almost all of my ancillary equipment, so now I have to recreate all that. But it's been a lot of fun being back here in the shop and bending tubing and welding again and just creating. It was nice to. I actually went to the drawing board, and a lot of guys do stuff on CAD, but I never took the time to learn. But I've got an old drawing board that I draw all these cars up on, and it works out pretty well for me.
And how much difference is the preparation for a little 500 as opposed to a typical USAC race at Eldora or Lawrenceburg or whatever?
There's a lot of difference. The main thing, obviously, with the pavement, you don't have to worry about the dirt so much. And we would build this car. It's built specifically for the little 500, for the small track, for Anderson Speedway. And the little 500 can be a little much of a contact sport getting through the field, so it's going to be beefed up for that as well. Survivability is one of the main things for the little 500, and with Brady driving, I think we've got a really good shot. He seems to have a nose to stay out of trouble out there.
And little 500 special event to bring you out to build a new car, do all this stuff, but just talk about some of the times of your career, the special venues and the special places that are very near and dear to you.
Well, the first USAC win that I ever got was at Marne, Michigan with Rich Vogler, and that was always a special race. I'll never forget that night. And obviously with Jerry Coons Jr., when we got penalized from the front row at Manzanita for the Western World and went all the way to the tail, but came back to win the race, that was a huge race for us. Winning the 4 Crown at Eldora. Eldora and Terre Haute were my dad's favorite tracks, and I guess I'm a little bit biased. I love those tracks as well. And anytime that we could win at Winchester or Salem, that was a big thing for me. There's just so many memories that I have of so many different drivers putting it in the winner's circle and winning on the mile at Phoenix. We actually had 2 cars out there, and we finished first and third with those. And we had a Silver Crown car that Pat Abel put in a winner's circle for me 3 or 4 times, and there's just so many memories and so many great people that helped me out to get this thing at the track and in the winner's circle, and the drivers are always very special to me as well.
And on an earlier episode of Thunder Relive, we had Jerry Coons Jr. on talking about that Manzanita win in 05, but the wide range of emotions. Tell us why. We heard it from his point of view, but tell us why you had to go to the back, and then as he moved forward, how your emotions changed, brought you to your knees, apparently.
Well, I couldn't believe it that it was all my fault. We were basically ready. We were sitting there ready forever, and they did a little bit more track prep, and I decided at the last minute we needed to do a little more grooving on the tire. And we had the tire grooved, and just as they blew the horn, we dropped the jack and started pushing out of our pit stall, and we had to back out and then go forward. And they told us at the driver's meeting you had to be headed towards the front straightaway when they blew the horn, and obviously we weren't. So I thought the penalty of going to the tail was a little harsh, and I was so pissed off, I said, let's park the car. We've been the fastest car here all week. We just don't need to go out here and tear it up trying to come through the field. And Jerry talked me down off the ledge, and he said, let me try. I think I can do really well. This car's so good out here. And sure enough, for him to come, and when he took the lead, I literally fell to my knees and looked up to heaven and said, thank you, Lord. You saved me. Because I would have been the GOAT for the team forever on that one, but instead it gave a great memory to a lot of people.
And Mopar Million, it seems to be the theme of things, just a wide range of emotions, which is typical in racing, but another one there where started off great, had a big hiccup, but just talk about that and what you had to do to overcome the situations there.
Tracy Hines was our primary driver back then, and we for the Mopar Million, you got to take a shot at everything. So we entered a second car with Dickie Gaines, and the car that Tracy was driving, he had driven it once, and he said, take this one apart and park it. It is absolutely the best car I've ever driven. And we did that, and it sat there for 4 months until the Mopar Million. We put it back together and took it up there, and he was quick time in both sessions. And even in the second session, when the track was completely worn out, he would have been third quick in the first session. So we knew we really had something. And on the start of the heat race, he got dumped down the front straightaway really bad and tore up the car. But because of the format, he was automatically locked into the feature. So now we had to concentrate on the other car with Dickie, and he got through the heat race and got transferred into the feature. So we left Dickie's car up there in one trailer and brought the other race rig home here, unloaded the car, had to cut apart the frame. I had to go over to my boneyard and find a frame that had a similar piece of tubing in it, cut that out, piece it all back together, weld it up, get the car back square, and put all the ancillaries on it and hope that it wasn't bent someplace else that I didn't find. And Tracy went out there, and I mean, he went from the tail. I think they started 22 or 24, I'm not even sure, but he went from the tail and finished 7th. The car was still good. But Dickie, he started mid-pack, and he took the lead. And again, that was another one of those things that I fell to my knees, but it wasn't because I was thanking God. It was because my legs were shaking so bad it wouldn't hold me up anymore. And up on the roof of the concession stand there at Eldora, and I couldn't believe my eyes what was happening. And when I saw how much room he was leaving between the wall and the exit of the corner, and when you have Jock Hodenshield behind you, I knew that was going to come at one point in time. And so obviously it was kind of a disappointment not to win that race, but it was just thrilling to see that I could put 2 really good cars on that track.
And still a massive payday.
It was a huge payday.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned about your rig, we talked about your team always race within your means and put money in the right places to be successful. First of all, talk about that rig that's, as Kirk Spridgen said, is probably more famous than some of your race cars. But let's talk about that, and then the process of just why you spent your money where you did.
Sure. We bought this rig that we tow with in 95, I believe it was. And it was a drag car setup, chaparral trailer with chaparral conversion hauler on it. We bought it at a drug auction of all things from the United States government, and converted it over so that it was sprint car racing, and we just started hauling with it. And I think it only had 8,000 miles on it when we got it, and we've got over 350,000 miles now. And we don't chase the World of Outlaws. We run basically USAC, so that's a lot of miles up and down the road. We've been through 3 engines in the thing. It's something else. But as my father said, I've never seen a great looking brand new hauler make you win a race. You got to put the money in the car. You got to put it on the tires, lightweight stuff, keep up with the technology, and stay fast. And that's been our formula over the years. I think a lot of people out there think Hoffman Auto Racing has this great big shop and pristine equipment and the best of everything. But I think they'd be surprised that all these cars are produced in a little 1,200 square foot shop with another 1,000 square foot of machine shop. And my oldest tool in there is a shear that was built in 1913 that we still shear panels up and plates up with so that we can build these cars.
And this shop is a lot of special things have happened in here, and said it's been around for a while. IndyCars housed here, all your USAC championship cars. Just how special of a place is this, where basically you start to win races at and championships where they're built?
Well, this shop that we're standing in here, that's the 1,200 square foot shop, we actually built this in 1973 to house the Indy cars. And prior to that, it was over next door with what's now the machine shop. And when I was a kid, I used to, as soon as dinner was over, I'd come out of the house and come out here and work in the shop with my dad and my grandfather. And one night I was pestering my dad at the dinner table, and wanted him to go out to the shop, and he said, I'll be out there in a little while. Why don't you go out there and take the wheels off the midget? And I think I was 5 years old. And I came back in about 15 minutes later. I said, now what? And he jumped up and ran out, and sure enough, I had jacked up the car and taken all 4 wheels off, and they're sitting there next to the thing. He didn't think I was going to do it. He just thought he was giving me something to do to keep me occupied. So I've been doing this a long time, and this is kind of a special place. As a matter of fact, my wife and I joke about it because one of our wedding photo album pictures are of me and the crew in our tuxes standing behind the Buick V6 in the shop. So it's a special thing here.
That's cool. And one of the cool things, the last year started a new tradition at the USAC banquet, the Richard Hoffman USAC National Sprint Car Entrant Champion Trophy. Just when you first heard about this, these plans being made, just what were the emotions that overcame you from that kind of honor?
You know, it kind of blindsided me. I had no idea. I figured if they wanted to be at the USAC banquet last year, there was some reason they were probably going to award my dad something, maybe a Lifetime Achievement Award or something. But when that came out, it totally floored me. I mean, my dad and I were really close for a lot of years. We've been inseparable on the race team, and to be able to win the Richard Hoffman Sprint Car Championship Award, it means the world to me. I can't even begin to put into words the emotions that this brings out, but I'm sure that he and my grandfather are up there in heaven smiling down on everything right now.
And the legacy of that trophy will live on forever, as Hoffman Auto Racing has for the past almost century. So, and we appreciate you being a part of USAC history and everything you've done and your family has done. It's just, we're really appreciative for all the great memories we've seen on the track.
At times it's been a contentious relationship. I remember that I used to be able to point to the USAC rule book in the mid-90s, and about a third of the rule book were rules that were written because I did something. So that was my proudest moment. It was like a competition between me and Danny Drynan to see who could have most rules written between us. But it was a lot of fun through the years, and it's been a great honor seeing the great champions that have come out of USAC racing and gone on to better things, and even the ones that have been around forever and keep doing it. It is really something special to be a part of USAC and part of sprint car racing.
Absolutely. Part of history. There you go. Thank you for joining us. It was Rob Hoffman for Richie Murray. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.